Hi, and welcome to another installment of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed. Today's podcast, well, as I start all the podcasts, we're always talking about solutions. We're always talking about workplace wellness. We're talking about mental health, and we're talking about mindset. Um, some of the core pillars of what we talk about on If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed. It's such an important conversation. And today's one, previous guest that we're getting back on, because I know that we're gonna start working together and things like that. And these are the conversations that have to happen. Because if we can have that conversation and it helps that one person, we can genuinely make a difference in the world. And that's what this podcast is about. I will give a precursor to it could be triggering, but we hope it's a triggering into a maybe it's now time I speak to someone. Whatever that is, whether it's a counselor, a therapist, or a coach, whichever way you choose to go, I think mind management is extremely powerful for so many different reasons. But before we go any further, just say hi, introduce yourself again, and tell us what you do.
So, hi everyone. My name is Dave Sleet. I'm the co-founder and non-clinical director for ANA Psychological Accreditation. It's the newest of the voluntary registers in the world of counseling, psychotherapy, coaching, and it's the first voluntary register in the country that opened the door to psychological support to professionals that work with psychology in their day-to-day work, but don't get any support, don't get any training, or very little training, like teachers, social workers, law enforcement, all these people who use psychology on a day-to-day basis, but get zero input from the mental health arena. So we were the first to open the door to that level of engagement. So very, very different to what is traditionally available.
Um, Dave, just before we go into the subject that we're going to be talking about today, which is with what happened last week, which was I guess it depends on how many people when people are watching this podcast, but it was Suicide Prevention Week last week. I think when we do these weeks, it brings highlight to those conversations. But every week should be Suicide Prevention Week. I think we should be very open and honest about that.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's been somebody who's just passed away. Nothing yet has come through in confirmation, but that gentleman did suffer with depression a lot of the time. But we're going to
Mhm.
talk about your journey and why you have created it's the Yellow Heart, isn't it?
Yeah. So the Yellow Heart Team initiative, um, which is something that is probably closest to my heart because it was a journey that I walked
Mm.
a long number of years ago now. But I wasn't able to make that journey without that one person that saw beyond the nightmare that I was in. So let's go back a bit, shall we?
Yeah.
Where was that journey started? That's what you really want to know, isn't it? Okay, so just before my 18th birthday, I was involved in a street attack and I was ultimately um, fighting for consciousness for 6.5 days after that. Um, that attack changed my life. In the instant that I heard the piece of wood crack over the top of my head. Now, that is painful. It is still a painful memory, but the impact wasn't fully understood, wasn't fully checked at the time. Um, you know, there was no clear um, bone injury, so therefore everything was kind of put down to tiredness, not feeling 100%. But if I had not been as physically fit as I was at the time, that attack would not have let me get up off of the floor. And I wouldn't be here. There is no doubt in medics' minds I should have not survived that attack. Four people served time as a result of the attack, but I spent 2 years in self-destruct. and I was not kind of seeing anything past that nightmare that my world had changed. Um, and counseling, family support, all came into play within that 2 years. But I met somebody as I was coming through that process that saw beyond all of the presentation that I was giving to the world. And that person became the big brother that I wish I'd had.
Mm.
And he was able to give me focus. He was able to give me the time to understand what I could do, not what the focus on what I had lost.
Hmm.
So before the attack, I had spent my entire childhood dedicated to learning and being fit, ready to go into the armed forces.
Yeah.
And that attack turned that off in that instant. The long-term impacts of that is my the muscles over my skull now work as a barometer. I can tell air pressure changing as it happens because the muscles react like they do for all of us. But when air pressure drops, that muscle tears open. And it has in the past put me on the floor. There's no way of kind of, sugarcoating that. So it is a massive, massive reminder every time the weather changes that I am carrying that injury. But for those 2 years after the attack, I mean, I I would go solo climbing, which is never a good idea.
True.
But I would go solo climbing on cliffs.
Even I'm again. I'll stop the podcast right there. Even I'm like, what are you doing? Why would you do a solo climb?
Because I had no intention of making it to the top.
It doesn't matter. Even if you're three quarter, even if you're halfway up, you're still 20 foot away from the floor climbing it on your own.
Yep. And I was in complete self-destruct mode. And for whatever reason,
Self-destruct mode.
I did not, for all of the love of family, for all of the kind of the love of the kind of my training partner who I have to give credit to because I very rarely do. Um, but Martin and the team at Belgrave Harriers were amazing. And even though I was in that mode and I couldn't see it at the time, they were phenomenal. Um, and my coaches worked really hard to get me back up to speed. Um, and, I ultimately retired from athletics as a result because I couldn't hold the memory for a race pattern. So I couldn't keep stride pattern. I couldn't hold any of that information in order to compete. The military medics knew that the head injury meant I was never going to be able to fly in an unpressurized environment. So my entire life as I understood it at that point, and it was gone. But Martin, who was my training partner at Belgrave Harriers, was phenomenal. He is still one of, if not my best friend. Um, and but the real kind of kickstart for me to come out of that destruction mode came with meeting Ted Murphy.
Hmm.
And Ted Murphy, for those that um, were involved in the hospitality sector in London back then, may already know that name. He was a phenomenal, classic gentleman who, for his young age, was he was the arch. archetype, if you knew him, you loved him. You know, there was nobody that I have ever met that has had a bad word to say about Ted, um, either professionally or personally. He was phenomenal. Um, and that's why when I look at how bad I was and what the things are that kind of got me through, that was the genesis for the Yellow Heart Team initiative.
So we're going to stay in that area. I'm a big believer in timelines, and I know that you've done a lot of things to help, get
Hmm.
past those things. So I'm not taking you back to any
No,
controlled, uncomfortable traumas and things like
no.
that. So for any one young person watching this, or God, it doesn't really matter. I mean, let's just put it out there. Ricky Hatton has just passed away. Nothing's yet been confirmed, but that he struggled with depression for many years, and I've had somebody that I was aware of down in another part of the world that committed suicide around 3 months ago, and me as a mind management coach, it's one of those things that I had. And we'll talk about our spaces as well. I was really bad with depression for about 6 to 7 months within my life because of something that happened, which is exactly what you talked about. And I didn't know I was struggling with depression. I didn't know what depression was. There's a lot of people don't know what it is,
Mm.
and we'll talk about what that is. But I did find NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and cognitive behavioral therapy, me learning the processes so I could use them on myself, really, really helpful, and understanding the power of the strategies used in life coaching.
Hmm.
And that's what sent me in to learn brain spotting, havening, psychosensory therapies, so that I can. And I know it doesn't work for everybody. I get that. It doesn't matter until we're possibly ready to relinquish what it is, or find purpose, or find meaning in life, or help, as I do with my clients, help people break down the meanings that they've had in the past. Suicide's still there and it's still growing negatively. I don't even know if I've used the correct words there in any way whatsoever, but it's still there and still just around constantly. And I believe there's more things out there that are there to help people think, that's something I'm struggling with, or that's
Yeah,
that's why we tell our stories so that somebody else says, oh, they might have the answer. Because it's not always going to be therapy, it's not always going to be counseling.
yeah.
Counseling's good for some people, it's not good for other people. A lot of my clients have come from counseling or therapy and said, well, I'm still stuck and I'm solution forwards. What is it you need to move forward? So coming back to that story of you as a young lad, you went to the it was the Navy you were trying to get into, wasn't it? The Armed Forces. It
Yeah.
was the Navy. You'd
Yeah.
done the test. You come out. You were physically fit. Then you got beat up by a gang of people, so that somebody else can go, oh shit, that's where I am, Dave.
Mm.
What? And those sabotaging behaviors. And I've got family members that have got sabotaging behaviors as well. And it is soul destroying knowing that we've got the things to help. You can't help people that don't want help yet.
Yeah.
So what was it for you when you'd had that future took away from you that you wanted, that you thought you deserved, you'd worked hard for?
Hmm.
What was that part of the journey? What was the internal conversations? What was the behaviors? What were the actions? Obviously, going rock climbing on your own, thinking, well,
I mean,
fuck it.
that's just one example.
Yeah.
Um,
What was it? Where were you, Dave, back in the day, and what were you going through?
the world ended.
So, what was your
Uh,
internal conversation?
what was the internal conversation? What's the point?
What's the point? Perfect. Great
What
question.
what the hell do I do now?
Perfect.
Everything I'd been told about don't have one strand to focus on, have this wide base that everyone had told me that was the right thing to do, that I'd said, no, I need to just focus on this path. I am going in this direction. I don't need all of that other stuff. I need to be able to do this. And I'd been proved wrong because that one path was now gone.
So was that
And as
ego where you didn't listen to other people? And that's a powerful question. Was that ego, and a lot of people in the world say just have one focus, don't listen to the naysayers, have one focus, because all the naysayers are just going to tell them their traumas and their things that why they didn't work for them. So you're 18 years old, you've dialed in, you've super focused.
where is it ego to say no? I'm determined. Yes, there is going to be an element of ego that says I've got this. I understand what I need to do. Distractions are taking me away from what I need to do. So there will obviously be an element of ego that's trying to protect that determination,
Yes,
right? You can't separate the two. Determination and ego ride side by side, right? But you can have ego without determination, and you can have determination without ego.
explain that.
So you can be determined,
Okay,
but you can be have a wider field of view by not having the ego that says this is the only focus.
nice.
Okay, right? You can have ego. I'm the greatest. I'm this. I'm this. I'm all of these things I've told myself. That in a lot of cases will have other people feeding that in. You're a great singer. You should go on the X Factor. No, you're really not a great singer, and no, you shouldn't go on X
Which
Factor.
happens an awful lot, by the way, because you
Right.
see the horror
But you
stories,
see,
yes?
yeah, and we see how that ego plays out when the reality hits,
Yes.
right? Because they've got the ego, but they don't have the determination. The determination comes from the knowledge, the understanding, the experience to use everything that's available to you.
Now, what you didn't mention there is skill. Because if you've
Okay.
got your mum and dad who are saying you're the best singer in the world, you're the best singer in the world, go and sing in front of Simon Cowell and Saturn, which we see lots of. Again, this is not an attack on Simon Cowell, because to be fair,
He knows his stuff.
he's right an awful lot of time. But when you see those people on the stage going, "I'm the best singer in the world," it doesn't matter what you say, Simon Cowell, I'm going to go and be successful. But yet the whole crowd is looking at him going, "You cannot." You cannot sing or
Okay.
hit a tone, a tune in
Okay.
any way. Where
So
is
you define that as skill.
I would define somebody as skill that they've practiced, not
Yeah.
not God
I'm
given
not
gift,
I'm not
skill.
knocking it, right?
Yeah,
What I go back, what I said was you don't have the knowledge. The knowledge and that self-awareness that comes from the knowledge of what you can do
there it is.
is buried there. Do you know you can sing or have you been told you can sing? They are two different things,
Love it.
right? Having the knowledge of what you can do, what you are capable of, has to be part of that determination. And this is why I say you can have the determination without the ego, and you can have the ego without the determination, right? But for the most successful people that combine both in the right balance, they get further, faster, and for longer. Because it's in the balance of all of those things to be able to say, I know what I need, I understand what I need to do and how to get where I'm going, and I've got the experience that I am building all the time in order to achieve, and the ego to protect it.
So when you're 18, going back to there, because that's exactly where we were. I know
Mm-hmm.
we're always going to move away and come back, right? What's the point? Internal conversation. I always talk about internal conversations, that the conversations that we're scared to have.
Mm-hmm.
What's the point?
That was a
Why me?
conversation that, okay, so the what's the point was one of the first real proper conversations that Ted and I had because he saw through everything I was presenting, and I was presenting everything's fine because I didn't believe and I didn't trust and I didn't understand what was actually happening to me,
Mm.
right? And therefore, if I didn't, how the hell was anybody else going to, right? So that first conversation with Ted around, what's the point? He pointed out my experience. He pointed out the things that I did understand, and he pointed out the things that I could trust in.
So now you've got a coach. To be fair, it sounds like a coach
Hmm.
highlighting perspectives that you didn't see or feel or could understand at that
Connect with.
moment in time.
Yeah, I just couldn't. I disconnected from the reality of what I was and who I was and my experience and everything that I could bring to the world because I was focused on what had been taken away from me.
So
And
you
what
were
had been
looking at
taken
lack.
away,
This is purely a foot. This is NLP 101, by the way,
yeah,
Dave.
right,
This is
exactly.
this is
Right,
exactly what we choose to focus on. We start creating more of.
right. So when Ted kind of highlighted the knowledge that I had from the experience that I'd been through, everything that I had done to get ready to go into the military, and everything that I understood about that world still had a value. And that was the first time anybody had said to me that there is value in what I can bring.
So there was value in your failure.
And he also pointed out that at the point all of this had happened, there was still no saying whether or not I was going to pass out and be able to fly aircraft for the military.
Which is
There was
very
no
true, actually. In all
guarantee,
fairness, that is yes.
right? There's no guarantee, no matter how determined I was, that I was going to be able to get through that process and have the career that I had shaped in my own head,
Yeah,
right? And that was a hard conversation to hear,
yeah.
right? And it took, it probably took about a year before Ted and I kind of, you know, like most kind of decent conversations, it started in a bar in Covent Garden, and it ended with a an invitation to look at the whole kind of VIP protection of guests at five-star hotels.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I had worth in myself again.
So that's where we're talking about increasing self-worth because this podcast is around helping understand people, not helping
Hmm.
understand people. We're talking about suicide,
Yeah.
and I'll share some of the things that I've understood, and I'll share. And I've my wife doesn't watch the podcast, but there was one part, and it wasn't that long ago. I was so exhausted, but this is me with all the tools that I have that help me manage my mind. And my wife has had suicide in her life. One of her family members did commit suicide. And it's I was absolutely exhausted.
Hmm.
I was so tired from something that had happened within business. I went into overdrive and I wasn't sleeping and I was going to every networking event I could do to just try and get my face in there so we can
Hmm.
start generating more things. And I remember just being so exhausted on a drive back from Dundee. Actually, it was Dundee back to Methil, and I was driving over the Tay Bridge, and I was just so exhausted. And I think this hopefully can be a valuable lesson for anyone. Is I was just so exhausted that my thoughts were more irrational. And I learned a long time ago that not everything that we think is real, and I don't have to interact with everyone. That's what meditation taught me. But even I driving, I was like, just what if I just go off the bridge and all this angst and anxiety and worry and everything that I was going through just would stop.
Hmm.
And then I did, open up and well, no, I mean, I just know because there's more to life than that. So I've had suicidal thoughts.
Hmm.
It is, but I also am not as scared as them as I used to be because I know they're just thoughts. But that's a me thing, and I'm not
Hmm.
saying to
Yeah.
de-escalate anybody else's scary thought patterns. But I
Yeah.
know that things are allowed to pop up. I just don't have to engage with them. But so let's bring that back to you, Dave.
Hmm.
When you're in that point and you're at the brink, what was your suicidal thoughts?
Um, there's the whole self-worth.
Yeah,
Just there's no answer to. Got nothing to bring, nothing to offer. I had seen the hell that the world kind of produces through my childhood.
yeah,
And I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to grow into that. Part of the reason for wanting to go into the military was to become part of the solution to avoid that,
yeah.
to get away from that. So to have that taken away was almost like, well, that's your escape route gone. You know, you're in this nightmare world where, abuse is not just a daily thing, it's a minute by minute existence. You don't have any kind of sense that you can do anything because the one thing you thought was the solution is gone.
I, and you, I don't want to say do you think because then we're bringing in
No,
our
there's no
thoughts.
thought. There's
No,
no
there's
thought here. Okay. Thought goes out the window when the fear, the anger, the pain
the pain.
becomes they are the three gremlins that are going to destroy the world in which you live if you let them out. And they are rattling inside the brain to go, we're going to break out of this cage and then it's done. Sorted.
And it's the emotions that we feel, such as hopelessness and guilt and shame, that just
Feed those
they
gremlins.
feed. We and our thoughts are a clear indication of. I always try and share to people that our thoughts and our internal conversation is a direct link to what we're feeling, which is an emotion.
Yeah.
So a lot of
And if
people
you
say,
can
I just don't know
understand
why.
what that feeling is and where the feeling is coming from, rather than focusing on the thought, because
Because
the
then we have
thought
the
is
belief,
secondary.
because the belief is what drives the emotion, and the emotion is what drives the thought. So that's the chain,
Yeah.
and it's
And
the
it, and
belief.
this yeah, and this is why when everybody gets to meet Siobhan in the next few months,
Yeah,
um, and she'll take you through the VC model that she's been using for the last 20 years, ultimately connecting with what is the feeling and focusing on the feeling rather than the thought
yeah,
will automatically change what the thought process comes. Because when you bypass that first step straight to thought, you're dealing with the wrong gremlin. You're
yes.
not dealing with the one that's actually stood there shaking the cage with everybody else.
Yes, and you're talking about shaking the cage. I talk about monkey mind, which is
Yep.
yeah, and it's like two gorillas fighting.
Yeah.
It is, and so to absolutely come back to how I was feeling a couple of years ago when I had all the mind management stuff in place, and I still was just so exhausted. I knew that that was the time I was like, right, I'm driving over. I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to do. But it popped up into my mind, and I'm like, right, now I know I need to do something. That's I did speak to my wife and say I'm just so exhausted. Even I had horrible thoughts on the drive over. I'm just so exhausted, and it it wasn't a nice conversation because there was tears and emotions, and my wife's extremely supportive at all times, but it was a horrible conversation. So it does sometimes not allow us to be able to say, look, I know I'm feeling like this now, and I know it'll pass, but this is where I was, and this is where I'm going to go because now I've
Mhm.
felt that. And as for any young person that's going through something, I have a pretty clear understanding of what I believe depression is. and
Mhm.
I'll share that belief. So my belief, of which some people will say that's not correct, Cuddy, or that's not the full scope of what it is. But
It's
I
your
believe,
experience and
yes,
your understanding of that emotional
which
connection.
helps me to be able to not go into a depressed state as much. So I know what I'm feeling and how my internal conversation is going. I'm like, right, okay, so I'm tired. I need to get some sleep, get some more water. That's not the cure for depression in any way whatsoever. But my belief of what depression is, it's an emotional state that I'm in because I am feeling that I don't have something, I can't do something, or it's not possible. So I start creating a focus of lack and can't and don't. And I know that when I change my questions from why me or why has this happened, I that now start changing the focus to, all right, what can I do? And I talked about this when COVID happened and everyone went totally depressed with COVID. Some people went really, when we were locked down. So I know that when the news is talking to me and telling, I don't really watch the news anymore for this reason, but
Mm.
when the politicians were stood there saying, you can't do this, you can't do this, and you can't do this now, that's
Yep,
going to automatically hit people into depression straight away. And
yep,
I was sat there going, all right, so I can't do that, that, and that. What can I do? Well, I know I can still go for a walk. I can still go for a
yep,
bike ride as long as I'm within a certain area. I can still go for a dip in cold water. So I had to just change that from, well, I can't do this and I can't do this and I can't do this. Use that in a business structure as well if you wish, to what can I do? Oh, well, I
yep,
can do this and I can do this and I can do this.
yep,
That changes my emotional state, which
yep,
takes me from depression to or depressed to possibility, outcomes, and solutions. And
yep.
that changes my emotional state.
Yep. And it's exactly what APA did with when COVID came out. We were the first mental health voluntary register to publish kind of guides on coping with lockdown. We were the first to give a psychological guide on how to grieve from a distance because it's the
Mm.
first time where grieving and not being able to connect had ever happened in a way that the modern age could understand. You know, but humans have been through grief from distance in the past, but it's never been in the modern age where we are used to instant gratification of whatever we want our feeling to be reciprocated with. That's all gone. So we were the first of the organizations. I think we were probably the only mental health organization to publicly make those guides available for free. That's another
Yeah,
factor here.
yeah,
A lot of people made a lot of money on the back of COVID when it comes to mental health. And APA was, we took a completely different course of action. You know, publishing those guides for free was just one step. But we also froze our membership costs, our course costs, everything. We froze them within 3 weeks of COVID being announced in the UK.
yeah.
Now, as a result of what happened in the pandemic, we still have a cost of living crisis. Yeah, I got into trouble for calling it a cost of greed crisis, but that's
Cost
a
of greed
personal.
crisis.
Uh, but we still operate at the same cost value to our members, to our clients, as we did in 2019.
Yeah. So,
Because we know that that support has to be accessible.
yes, it's amazing. It genuinely is. So, what helped you bring your self-worth up? I know you were talking to Ted,
Yep.
absolutely brilliant, but what genuinely started taking it? Because we're going to share a story of the time that you met Ricky Hatton as well. So we'll come to that. But just to
Yep.
go back to that point of you said that the self-worth was low. What did you do to get your self-worth up?
I started to believe that what the experience, all of the experience that I'd had, whether it's the stuff I'd gone through as a child and what I'd seen and experienced as in that growing, whether it was what I had learned about the military environment and all of that experience, I could put all of that into something that made life easier for the people around me in real time. So as a result, and I didn't, I probably, as much as I probably said at the time, yeah, we're getting there. We got this, we got this, we got this. I probably didn't actually connect completely with that sense of self-worth until we had redesigned the operating protocols for royal premieres at the hotel in Leicester Square. When that framework, which was probably the first real kind of use of all of my knowledge, experience, and understanding, came into one entity. And we were able to provide VIP security at the moments where the premises were surrounded by thousands of people because there was a royal premiere. And for those that know Leicester Square, the hotel on the south corner overlooks the red carpet, which, for anyone who understands security, that is your red zone. When you have VIPs, when you have royals, when you have dignitaries, that's the zone that has to be protected.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of layers to that, which I'm not going to go into for obvious reasons. But when you are responsible for the building that overlooks that, you're now a potential crime zone before you even open the doors on the day.
Yeah.
So by reshaping all of that kind of process of protection and putting layers of security and mindset for security in place into the operation, so it didn't become a major, oh my God, we've got a royal premiere coming up in a month. We need to make sure we've got this in it. It's literally, what time is the premiere? Grab that file because it gives you everything that you need to do in the build up for that month.
Yeah.
What happens on the day then becomes a smaller file and all of the security protocols and all the chopping and changing and everything else to make sure that that building does not become the center point of a crime scene. And all the time you are still protecting the guests that have just happened to be staying at the hotel at that time.
Yeah.
When that actually went into action for the first time, that's when I saw self-worth.
See? And was that still, but that sounds like that wasn't at 18, 19 years old. Was that at that time?
So I had 2 years of self-destruct.
Yeah.
I had a year of kind of positive recovery.
Yeah.
So, and then a year of let's get this moving with these kind of projects, everything else within the business. So by 1998, we had that security protocol kind of reshaped, and it was like, okay, this works.
Let me ask you a question with your years of work. Explain what APA is. Just, I don't, it's all right, me and you saying
Yeah.
APA, but
Okay.
yeah.
So APA stands for ANA Psychological Accreditation.
Yeah.
ANA is an ancient word. It's
ANAY.
been
ANAY. ANAY.
ANA, AY,
ANA.
ANAY. Okay. So Siobhan discovered this, and because she was working off of the idea of A to Z, right? We all take a journey, but we never actually get to Z. We only ever get back to a new beginning,
Well, Zed's death, I suppose, isn't it?
right? So whatever we do, it starts something new, right? So if you start at A, you're always going to end up back at A because you're going to start something else. So she started with ANA and then started to look at, was it a word for number one, or was it just, the letters being linked together? And she discovered that in civilizations across the world throughout time, there are about 6 words. I don't know all of them, but ANA is one that comes up repeatedly in various different pronunciations and connotations, but it always means the same thing. It's either torchbearer, bringer of change, radical teacher.
Ah,
All of these things kind of coincided with what we want, what Siobhan wanted to do for the world of mental health.
yeah.
So ANA became this kind of maverick within the world of mental health. And when we sat and looked at all of the protocols for the voluntary registers in the UK, and I've told this story before, so if anybody's heard it, I'm really sorry. But I printed out every single one of the protocols for all of the voluntary registers in the UK, and I laid them all out on the floor in Siobhan's living room. And and you can imagine what that's like. I mean, there is thousands of pieces of paper, right? And she walks in, and I've got a red line going across all of these pages, right? And she's like, "What have you done? What's going on?" And I says, "It's all copy and paste. This bit copies here. They've rephrased it, but it's exactly the same, and all of them. It's like I've got the recipe for Coke, and I've got Coke Diet, I've got Coke Zero, I've got
I'm
Coke
glad you
for
finished
free,
that
I've got
conversation there. Yeah.
right. It's all of these kind of. It's just copy and paste all the way through. And she went, right, now you've spent a whole day, killed off the printer. What do we get out of this? It says, now I can go to a blank piece of paper and go, what works? Move that. What doesn't work doesn't come across. Then we can see where the gaps are and we can fill those gaps with what actually fits for purpose.
It's definitely mad scientist stuff. You do realize that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Doc Brown, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Right.
Mad scientist in a good
Yeah, I
way.
mean, talk about the whole autistic brain
Yeah.
kind of in action, right? So,
Would that not be the ADHD brain or the autistic brain?
do you know what? Somebody will tell me at some point, right? I don't, whatever badge somebody wants to give me, I'll wear the badge, you know? I mean, I was in the Scouts at one time. I'm sure I got badges given to me, and that's fine.
Right.
But
And then
but this is
that.
but this is where APA became different because APA was not trying to replicate what else everyone else has done simply to get members.
Which is why you became a torchbearer, which goes back to the name ANAY, and that's your logo. And on
Yep.
that bombshell, we're just going to pause there for a second. So after that little pause, it's talk about the time you met Ricky Hatton.
Oh God. That was totally unplanned.
Yeah.
And I was working for a hotel in Salford Keys. Um, and he was a guest and he brought an entourage of people who, were loving the kind of notoriety of Ricky. And he was not connected to that. He was he was present, but he was present for the other people that were around him. He was not holding court. He was not the public personality that, as a fan, I had come to kind of see in his presentation.
So
Uh,
they were hanging on to his name.
oh yeah.
Right.
And they were loving the fact that, hey yo, we're here with Ricky. Da da da. It's like, yeah, and Ricky's like, yeah, okay, that goes. Yeah.
I suppose everyone uses. Even I'm thinking about the times that I suppose we have that fame and we say there's a connection to that fame, so it inflames something in us. Because I often say, oh, I know the Utah Saints, which I
Hmm?
would consider myself quite good friends with them.
Hmm.
Um, Tried to get them on the podcast, they've said no. Um, and it's funny. Somebody asked me that question. Could you know all those times you've worked on cruise ships? Who have you met? I said, look, I actually do. I've met some really cool people,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you do see that. And I'm a big believer in identity and living in that space that we're in now. So
Hmm.
if they were living in a space of Ricky's past,
Yes.
and Ricky's sat there anyway, carry on with the story when you met
Okay.
him, and yeah,
So you'll know yourself when we're in an environment, people can levitate towards us, right? Whatever the energy is that we present when we're having conversations, there are people that connect with that at the point that they need to have that connection. And I think that's what happened with Ricky, because at some point, early hours of the morning, he just asked if he could have a word. And we had a half-hour conversation sat in the closed breakfast room of the hotel away from
Mhm.
everybody else. And he asked me one question. And what do you think of me? And it was the most telling
It is
question anybody could ask.
because then he doesn't know who he is, so he's asking other people for. This is what I can. By the way, this is exactly. And I know this was a while ago, but
Yeah,
this is one of the biggest questions people can't answer.
yeah,
Who are you? So
yeah. So, I said, and I at the time I was not, APA hadn't even been a thought,
yeah.
right? Um, I was coaching, but not in that context, and certainly not to anyone at that time that had the experience that Ricky had, right?
Mm,
So I had been around sports people a lot when I was younger, but I wasn't working in that arena at that time. Um, and I won't go into
yeah.
the whole of that conversation for obvious reasons, but the one thing that kind of stuck with me afterwards, and I know it stuck with Ricky because he sent a message to say thanks afterwards, was that he was not living as he had. And when he lived as he had been happier, he had been more in control, he had been more himself and true to himself than he was at that moment in time. And he asked, but why? I'm this, I've done this, I've got this, I've done all of the amazing stuff that he'd done. So why aren't I living the best life now?
Do you think? Well,
Because
can I?
the ultimate kind of response was because you got that because of the things that you did and enjoyed to get that.
He had a goal.
Once you've achieved it and you turn off those ingredients, you can't have it anymore. If you're going to make a cake, and this wasn't part of the conversation, but if you're going to make a cake, you need to have certain key things, right? Flour, eggs, butter, whatever, right? But once you've made the cake, you want to do it again, and you want that experience that you get from eating that cake. you're going to need to kind of at least have those core ingredients again. And if you don't use the core ingredients that got you that cake, whatever you taste afterwards ain't going to be the same. And
Unless,
he was trying to eat a cake based on his memory without using the ingredients that gave him the memory.
and that's one of the biggest things that people struggle to do. And again, it comes back to when I'm working with clients. The amount of times my clients come to me and say, "Oh, I've got no confidence to do this." I'm like, "Why have you got confidence to do that?" "Oh, well, I know what I'm doing." "All right, bring that over there. Why do you know what you were doing there?" "Because, well, I learned this and I learned this and I learned this." "Right, we just have to start again here. Now you have to learn this and this." Yeah, yeah.
But he was probably the he's not the only person that's asked that question, and you know yourself, it's a common question when someone has had their personal sense of identity challenged by whatever situation.
It's that loss of identity is freaking
Right.
huge,
And it creates grief.
which is
Grief is the one
hopelessness. Yes.
you, just as for myself, when I went through what I went through, I was grieving, but I was grieving an idea. I was grieving for the idea of what my life was going to be.
Still loss.
That loss of being able to do what I thought I was going to be doing is still a grief. I was grieving that idea. We grieve relationships, we grieve employment, we grieve every single day over something.
Let's. You're right in the wheelhouse. I want to expand on that just for this podcast, and I'm conscious of time. I know we've both got things to do. So, and I've done podcasts on grief with two major experts in grief because of what they've gone through, and it was a fantastic, amazing conversation, of which I took away and learned. Even when you understand identity and you understand grief, that's a lower resonance of an emotional state that would head us down the spiral of our emotions to again low vibrational states such as depression and
Mhm.
being depressed. And that creates a certain chemical within ourself of lack, and that's what we stay there for. And a change of focus can help that. But let's say if a postman and every day, hi Dave, what are you? I am a postman, and that's what I do on a daily basis. Pleased to meet you, Cuddy. Oh, pleased to meet you. The day you've been given the sack and you're no longer a postman, and the day after somebody asks you, "Oh, hey mate, how are you doing, Dave? What are you doing these days?" "Oh, I'm Dave. Oh shit, I'm not a postman." Boom, grief. That's an identity. We've now created an identity of who we are with that. "Oh no, I'm a postman. This is what I do." You've now kind of got a purpose around that. Once that label's been took away, we then don't know who we are because we've been identifying as a postman for such a long time.
Mhm.
Let's use empty nest syndrome, which is when a mum is a mum and the kids leave the house and they say, "Who are you?" "Oh, well, I'm a mother to two." "Oh no, I'm not a mother." That's identity because even though you're still a mum and the kids have left
Mm.
home, there's still a lack
Mm. There's a
and
grief
a
for what
grief.
was. Yeah.
Am I still a
And
mum?
yeah.
So a
And this
lady
is
going through the menopause.
yeah.
"Oh, I'm a
She's
lady and I'm a
grieving.
woman,
Yeah,
but
she's
I don't
grieving
feel
that
like a woman."
emotional
Yes.
hormonal balance that was there before. It's grief.
So it's a
Grief.
grief of identity of, am I still a woman? Am I still a lady? Am I still a mum? Am I still, a
Mm.
provider in those kind of ways? And that's again when you exactly go back to when you were 20-year old and you had Ted to go, but let's have a look actually what you still have, what you can still do because of that experience. And that's the
Yeah.
same with a lady going through the menopause. Well, no, now you've got this story that you can help others go through and grieve through,
Yeah.
and that gives purpose and a new identity.
Yeah.
It's what we're always talking about is identity.
Yeah.
Identity.
And it's that self-awareness. So when we have that thought, that downward spiral,
Yeah.
That's all driven by what we think is happening.
Or
When
what
we
we
can put that,
feel that is
hold on,
happening.
hold up, hold up, hold up, hold up.
Oh, I love it.
When we can put the brake on and go, right, what's the feeling? We can go, it's grief. It's not the depression thought. The feeling is I'm grieving. Right, okay, what do we do with grief? When we bypass that and we go to the thought of, oh, this is depression and I'm going down, 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 you don't have a feeling to hold on to that and to stop that from sliding down. It just gets sucked into that black hole. By being able to attach to, right, what is the feeling here? You're able to then control the focus of the thought. And it doesn't become an open door to the gates of hell
That
of
we put our,
that
we can find
psychological
ourselves in.
slide. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
right. And this is why when I kind of looked at what are the solutions here, because we've just had Suicide Prevention Week, right? And we talk about preventing suicide in with the same mindset that we do about preventing obesity, right? It's almost too little, too late, and not enough because we're not looking at what is the positive here. We're trying to prove a negative. When we focus on somebody who wants to lose weight, as an example, and I'll come back to the suicide link in a second, but we focus on I am gaining health. I'm not losing weight, I'm gaining health.
I said that to myself this morning on my walk. I'm just getting
Yep.
healthier. If an outcome of that is losing weight, I'm just getting healthier.
Right. And this comes back to something that I got taught by listening to a very famous sprint hurdler. Do not run for the tape. Run past the tape. What's on the other side of that achievement? If the achievement is hitting the tape before everybody else, what's on the other side of that? Because if you run to what's on the other side of it, you will get through that tape before everybody else every single time. And what that basically transpires into is somebody saying, I want to lose weight. Right. How are you going to feel when you've achieved it? What are you going to be able to do once you've connected with the feeling of that achievement? Now your goal is not lose weight. Your goal is the emotional achievement that you're going to have from achieving that at the tape. And
Yeah.
that's bigger than what's at the tape.
And that helps creating. So if you say I'm going to go on a diet, then you know you're going into lack and takeaway and kind of punishment. But if you say I'm going to go and get healthier, but if an offshoot of that is to become thinner or lose weight, you're
Then
not
so be it.
focusing on, yeah, so you're focusing on a gain. So I'm like,
Right.
well, this is what I'm going to gain here. I can
Exactly.
gain getting into that suit. What happens if I get into that suit? Well, if you get into that suit, you start getting paid more money. So we're now taking away from, you're looking at everything that you're going to gain from this loss without focusing on any loss whatsoever. Again, and that's a perspective. And
Right.
that's the power of moving people, which is what we do in coaching. Let's be honest, we all know that.
Right.
That's what we do in
So
coaching.
when you think that mindset, you can see exactly the same mindset when people talk about suicide prevention. Suicide prevention is only going to be possible to anybody if we can break the weight of the pain pattern that they're carrying, right? The only way you can break that from getting to the point where it's so heavy that suicide is the only perceivable option,
To relinquish the pain that we're feeling.
right? But they're only going to relinquish it to somebody else. The pain doesn't go away. Pain's like energy, right? You can't get rid of it. You can deplete it, you can expand it, right? So I've said this for years, and Ted was one who kind of opened my eyes to this. Suicide is a pain relay. Whatever your pain is, suicide ends your carrying of that baton, but it is passed to those that you love most, because they are left with that pain of not knowing what you were dealing with and why you weren't able to speak to them. And that amplifies the pain baton. It doesn't reduce the pain.
Are you now starting to create an awareness and a pain threshold for if we deal with it and resolve it, you don't have to pass it on to somebody else? Because if you were to ask somebody how you're feeling right now, would you want that to give that to your wife? They would go, no, absolutely not. I don't want anybody else to do this. So what you're doing is you're creating a motivational part of let's deal with it with you so that you don't have to pass that on to somebody else. And that starts to creating the
Yeah,
suicide. So that's where
yeah,
suicide prevention is.
yeah. So suicide prevention, looking at it in a different way, that is more psychologically rooted, right? We know that when somebody commits suicide, the ripple of that pain can touch up to 130 to 140 people,
Mm.
right? That's a big ripple, right? And those that experience the loss of a parent to suicide will carry that pain for life. Just as any parental death has that impact, when it's suicide, there is a sting in that tail for a child, right? What the Yellow Heart Team Initiative does is give absolutely every human being that's got one of these magical devices the opportunity to do something that most people that survive suicide attempts say they didn't have the capacity to do before. So, most people who will carry that burden for months, sometimes years, will get to a point where they convince themselves they cannot talk to anybody that they know. Their issues, their challenges, their fears are too big and they don't want anybody else to be affected by them. That's the gremlin speaking. What Gizmo says is we're here, we care, we want to know, and we want to help you deal with whatever monsters there are before the monsters deal with you. Because the quote that's on all of the Yellow Heart material is easier to support somebody before a crisis than it is to grieve them after one. But most people will convince themselves they can't speak to anybody. And a large number of people will sit with their phone going through their contacts list in those hours, days, weeks before, going, can't tell them, can't tell them, can't tell them. And they count people out in order for the gremlin to prove its point that there's nobody you can talk to, nobody cares, etc. Right? So what the Yellow Heart does is say before there's a crisis, go through your phone contacts and the people that when there is no crisis, that's important. Who would you want to be able to reach out to and just have a conversation? Not about a crisis, but just they are the closest people to you. They are the people that you can trust with what's happening for you. Have a conversation with them. Reinforce that connection that you feel with them and ask them to be part of your yellow heart team. And then on your contacts list, next to their name, you put a yellow heart.
Um,
So when you look through your phone contacts, you have a whole heap of people that it doesn't matter what you're going through, doesn't matter how tough it is, you have a
mm,
visual reminder that people care and you've already had the conversation that you want them to be that person. What that does to that friendship is drive it through the roof,
that's really powerful, mate.
right? But then it's every couple of weeks, make one of those calls and just go, hey, how you doing? Inviting them to sound off with you
Yeah,
and letting them know that you are their yellow heart team.
yeah,
And all of a sudden, you have started to build your own personal protection environment. Because that environment that you create with that team of people are going to be the people that, as things get tough, you're able to vent off before they become a crisis.
yeah.
And that will reduce the weight of that pain baton. That will increase your understanding of potential solutions before it's a crisis. It will allow you to have a network that works for you rather than the gremlin telling you that nobody's there.
Right, so it's the gremlins, the monkey mind, it's the conversation. That's really smart, Dave. I'm going to put a yellow heart on your name. However, would my no, because the yellow heart's for me. It's not for my wife to phone after I've. Yeah, perfect.
Right?
Dave, you're in my yellow heart zone.
And you know what? I have said to everybody that has asked me to be part of their Yellow Heart team, it is the biggest honor I can carry as a friend to
Oh.
anybody.
Do you know what? That's the perfect stopping spot point there, mate. That is absolutely bang on, Dave, because that was the whole point of the podcast was how can we, support the prevention of suicide, and that is such a clever concept, which is what you do with all the stuff that you've got at Anaya at APA. It is such a clever thing, and I know that we work together quite closely. Dave, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And I hope and I have had goosebumps through this entire conversation.
Oh wow. Oh
Right?
shit, that's good.
Um, and you know, remembering some of those conversations with Ted, um, there is something that, as a kind of, who was this man?
Mm,
Ted was a genius at being able to identify the power of a conversation.
mm.
You know, he would, a conversation changes the world.
It
That was
does.
his,
That's the power of words.
right? But that was the thing that he would always kind of say, we'd be out and, we would have a huge amount of fun. Right. I was in my 20s, for God's sake. We had a lot of fun. Um, but he would always be the person in a crowd who was having a quiet conversation with somebody. He was the person that would have that quiet word that just reduced and de-escalated situations out in public. He was the person that you couldn't wish for a kinder human to connect with.
Mm.
And he understood that power of conversation more than anyone else I had ever met.
And that's why it's dedicated to Ted, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, mate, that's getting me welling up.
You know, Ted passed in October 2018, off the coast of Ireland. And I miss him near enough every day. And
Mm.
I'd be lying if I said it was every day.
He's still with
Because
you.
the days, yeah, because the days where I don't kind of have that conscious, it's in there.
He's still with you.
And he's there.
Yeah.
And he has touched everything that I do with APA, whether it's our framework for hospitality,
Hmm.
whether it's our framework for people that have been through abuse in the home. Ted's fingerprints are on my heart, and I'm sure at times he's probably held my brain together when it's needed it to.
Oh, Dave Sleet, as I live and breathe, you're getting me chopped up. But I will say thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you to Ted for being on the podcast. Thank you very much for Dave Sleet being on the podcast. And thank you very much for this important conversation.
Thank you.
And for anyone watching any of the podcasts, if this one's resonated with you, there's nearly 1,000 podcasts and snippets for things. Like and subscribe. And this is a conversation starter. Put in a comment, put in a yellow heart to the podcast if you got to the end of it and you understood the power of the yellow heart, which is to help the prevention of suicide, just with everyone, not just men, but for ladies and teenagers and everything. As always, big love from Cuddy, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast.